I'm making sauerkraut today, and I thought I'd grab the camera and take you along, show you how I do it. This is a nice medium-sized cabbage. You're going to need some salt, and it has to be a non-iodized salt. Anytime you're fermenting foods, you're going to need a non-iodized salt, otherwise it'll interfere with the development of the good bacteria. And you're also going to want a pretty decent sized bowl because there's a bit of mess involved. I have one of these vegetable pounders. They do come in super handy, but if you don't have one, it's okay. You can do it by hand. Just takes a little muscles, that's all. You're wanting a nice, clean, sterilized jar. You're also going to really want it to be a wide mouth jar. You want fermenting weight and a clean cloth to cover it up with and an elastic to hold everything in place. And that's about it. So let's get started. First thing you're going to want to do is to remove a couple of the outer leaves. Usually the first 2 or 3 are a bit dirty or a bit wrinkly or dry. So you're just going to take those ones off. We won't use them. Now the first good leaf that you come to, you're going to want to carefully peel that one off because we're going to keep it and use it at the very end of the process. So make sure you hold on to at least one really good leaf. Now you can cut the cabbage in quarters. It's usually an easy size to handle. And then that tough inner core, you're just going to want to take that part off. We're not going to use that. And now you're ready to start slicing up your cabbage. You want it to be fairly fine, about 1/4 inch or so is good. I've done this with a food processor before, and honestly, I think that there's just more to clean up if you do it that way. So I tend to just do it by hand. So your cabbage is all sliced up, you've got it into a nice big bowl, and now you're ready to add some salt. Salt is a critical ingredient in fermenting any food, so this being about a medium-sized cabbage, I went with 1.5 tablespoons of non-iodized sea salt. You could add a bit more or less depending on the size of your cabbage. Now I just mix it around initially with my hands just to get the salt sort of spread out evenly. It's going to help the cabbage to release a lot of its liquid. So I just kind of squish it around, massage it a bit with my hands. Now if you don't have a vegetable pounder, you can continue to do this and just using your hands massage it and squish it and draw out a lot of that liquid. But if you do have one of these vegetable pounders, go ahead. Now's the time to start beating up the cabbage. I would say I usually pound it or use my hands and massage it for about, 3 to 5 minutes. You want to start to see some liquid come out the bottom. And at that point, I just let it sit and rest for another 10 minutes or so. When it's rested and you pull it apart and you see some liquid in the bottom, you know it's time to start packing it in a jar. This is where your wide mouth mason jar comes in handy, and if you have one of these funnels, it does make things a little bit easier, slightly less messy. You want to start by putting a couple handfuls of the shredded cabbage into your jar and then press it down as hard as you can. The idea is to get all of the oxygen out so there's no air to interfere with the fermentation and create mold. You'll start to see later on a little bit of liquid come up to the top. So just keep adding more cabbage. It's amazing how much cabbage you can get in a jar, and just keep squishing it down. So there you go, you just keep adding cabbage and then you just keep squishing it down, add more cabbage, squish it down. At the very end, I like to use my hands and push it as hard as I can, making sure that as much liquid comes up as possible. Now is where that piece of leaf that you saved comes into play. Just really roughly kind of form it into a circle about the size of the top of your jar. I like to do sort of 2 layers of it because what I want is for that leaf to stop any little bits of cabbage from floating to the top. If they do float to the top, they're more likely to start to mold. If you've got a fermenting weight, this is where you pop it on top, and then I push down just to make sure that as much liquid can come up as possible. So grab that piece of fabric and pop it on top along with an elastic band. This is going to help to keep bugs of any sort from getting into your ferment. I find in the first few days it tends to bubble up and sometimes over, so a little bowl or a saucer. It's a perfect way to keep it from making a mess on your counter. Okay, at this point you're done. Now all you've got left is the dishes. Oh, and to wait about 5 to 10 days to let your sauerkraut fully ferment. Okay, so it's been a week and the sauerkraut has been bubbling. It's been doing its thing and it's beautifully fermenting. So I could let it go for a few more days, and if I did, it would just develop a more and more sour taste to it. But I think this is actually pretty good for me for this time. I don't know if you can see up close and see all the little bubbles in there. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to pop the cloth off. As you can see, there's some bubbles on top, a little bit of white. That's nothing to worry about. I'm going to pop the weight out. I'm going to take the 2 leaves that I had put on top off. I'm going to put a lid on it and it can go in the fridge. And as long as it goes into the fridge, it's going to slow down, nearly stop the fermentation process. So that's it. The sauerkraut is all done. It's ready to be eaten. It's pretty soft. In this case, it's kind of mildly sour, but it is super healthy, super good for you. We do try to have some kind of fermented food at least once a day. And so with this jar, I'm just going to pop a lid on it. I'm going to put it in the fridge. And when it's about halfway done, I will start over again and make another jar. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it taught you something, and I most of all hope that you will go out and give it a try yourself. Make some sauerkraut. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.